I was very lucky, I would say, to actually start from the very core, in my opinion, the very core of any marketing strategies, which is content and creativity, because it's much, I would say, it really put down the foundations for myself to understand how can you convert audiences, no matter what kind of product you're selling and no matter what kind of companies you're going to work for, how you're going to convert that audience into revenue. You just want to make sure that person will fit that speed and that velocity. So yeah, having a right balance between hard skills and soft skills is very crucial when you lead a team. I'm a big advocate for what you would say the human to human movement. It's not B2C, it's not B2B, it's human to human. You always talk to human.
Hey, welcome to the Message Market Fit podcast. I'm your host, Chris Silvestri, and if you're new here, this is a show where I chat with B2B SaaS folks in marketing, product, growth, and founders about how they join the conversation already happening in their customers' minds. We dive deep into their thinking, their systems, and their playbooks to see how they empathize with their audience and speak to them in a way that resonates, so they're compelled to take action. Join us and learn how you too can shape your messaging strategy and write copy that truly resonates and differentiates you. I'm super excited about my guest today, Michele Tropeano. Michele is the head of growth and marketing at YunoJuno, a platform that helps companies with hiring and managing contractors and freelancers. In this episode, we chat about Michele's transition from B2C to B2B marketing, how to effectively position against competitors as an enterprise SaaS company, the importance of simplifying messaging, and what to look for when hiring for marketing roles. Let's dive right in. Hey Mickey, great to have you here. Welcome to the podcast. How are you?
Thank you very much, Chris. I'm good, thank you. How are you doing?
I'm great and excited to jump into this. So we met actually in London for was a B2B SaaS meetup, and we're both Italian, so we connected on that, but also we're like B2B SaaS marketing nerds, so I'm excited to get into all of that. And why don't we start? I love that you've had such a varied career, and I want to dig into that to start. So can you give us some of the milestones of all the work that you've done?
Absolutely. I loved the fact that you had mentioned the both Italian, both marketing nerds. We met together. That's clearly a match. I love that. So yeah, of course. So I started about, I want to say 12 years ago in a very different industry and role really. So my first 3-4 years of my career, I worked for large media and music entertainment enterprises. So my very first role was actually at Vice Media, RIP, because I think in the previous few weeks they actually shut down. But yeah, I was one of the first hired for their music channel called Noisy. So that's where I started my career in the music and in the social content world. And from replying to angry to creating snippets of videos to share on, I guess at the time really, on the very first version of Instagram. And then from that I stayed in the media music world and worked at other different brands still in the same space. So from Red Bull, I joined Red Bull as a contractor to work there, looking after their Red Bull Records roster, social content and online PR actually at that time, and then from there moving on to the more like music tech sort of industry. First joining Vivo, which is a music video platform hosted on YouTube, and then to Deezer, actually from Vivo to Deezer, which is again like another music streaming service. At the time a Series E, just before going into IPO. And that kind of was my first taste of startup, really, and actually a scale up, really. Then from then on, I moved into performance marketing. So the first 5 years, as I was saying, was all around social and social content, organic content, and then I honed the skills and took those skills into performance marketing and media marketing. And then I went to join Universal Music, which is one of the biggest music company, and I there was part of the first in-house agency. So essentially Universal Music decided to in-house their media buying. And so it was, I think second hire to essentially run the performance marketing within Universal Music for the various labels, from working on Beatles reissues to Disney soundtracks. And again, like, it was a really interesting space at the time to be, because media buying was not like a new thing for Universal Music. You know, when like a lot of enterprises, a lot of big companies really at the time handed over their performance marketing, their media marketing, their paid media marketing to agencies essentially. But it was just starting then to actually in-housing it, because they understood the need of marrying the paid media, the creativity, and therefore it was a really interesting time for myself as well to really learn to merge the two.
Wow.
And I would say the first real startup experience was within Universal Music, when I moved up from looking after purely performance marketing and media marketing for Universal Music onto owning the full marketing function at SpinUp, which was a SaaS, a distribution platform funded by Universal Music. And that kind of was really my first startup experience. Very small team, but also looking at the full funnel, or as growth operators like to call it, the growth loops, to move that to basically acquire and retain users across the world. When I started was around, I think we just started to expand in different territories, so there was around 200,000 users. So my role was essentially to lead the go-to-market strategy for the global expansion. So looking at launching the product on Japan, Southeast Asia, Australia, and driving that acquisition, that global acquisition across all the different territories, and also as well across different channels.
Yeah.
My first, and then from fully B2C marketing, I call myself like a T-shaped marketer, moving to the dark side of marketing, which is B2B, which I joined around, I think 2.5 years ago. I joined YunoJuno to head up the growth and marketing team, and here I am.
Nice, love it. I'm super curious because it sounds, especially at the beginning with all those Universal, Red Bull, Vice, sounds like you've been thrown a lot of time to swim with the sharks, especially at the beginning as one of the first few hires. So I was wondering, what does that feel like, and how do you start something like from scratch like that and ending up leading all the efforts?
It's a really great question. I wish I had the first thing. I wish I had a playbook back then, and to be fair, I wish I had a playbook right now.
Which are the playbooks are trendy now.
Yeah, exactly. I wish there was a framework or a playbook that I could just like open and copy and paste, but unfortunately there wasn't. It's still like a very challenging. It's always very challenging to be the first marketer or like a solo marketer, and like understanding the various parts you need to merge together to make something grow. I think it always comes back to, like, regardless of where you go, regardless how big your team in the company is, I always believe the very fundamentals of marketing don't really change, regardless if it's a solo marketer, a big company, a B2B or B2C. You need to make sure that you have a clear targeting, you need to have a tight and distinct positioning, and then drill down on your strategic objectives and understand how you're going to measure that. And that is like the fundamentals I always take with me in any role, and also at any stage of my career, from being the first social media manager at Vice Media all the way to where I am now.
Yeah. And I also super interested about your transition, especially from content and paid to actually more of a growth marketing role. What did working on content taught you that you're actually using now with the growth marketing?
I've seen few people actually discussing this, and how, if you look at right now, the way that even performance marketing is evolving with Meta becoming less and less relying on very targeted options, and actually looking at the broad targeting, and therefore pretty much relying more on the content and the messaging and the creativity. It's really, I was very lucky, I would say, to actually start from the very core, in my opinion, the very core of any marketing strategies, which is content and creativity, because it's much, I would say, it really put down the foundations for myself to understand how can you convert audiences, no matter what kind of product you're selling and no matter what kind of companies you're going to work for, how are you going to convert that audience into revenue, essentially. And the answer to that really is all in value proposition and messaging. And that really was it was very, it was great for me to actually start from that sort of like organic content, and then taking that knowledge, creating messaging, creating content for people to resonate with, to then apply that to the full funnel, and also to all channels as well, all channels and all audiences.
Yeah, and especially because I guess that teaches you a lot about understanding different level of awareness that people have when they find your brand, and taking each level wherever they're at and turn them into a conversion at the end.
Absolutely.
Yeah, awesome. So you mentioned that, you had that big transition from B2C to B2B. So how do you think about that? What's the mindset change that someone has to make to go from B2C to B2B?
Yeah, it's something I've been thinking for a while. I started actually documenting that, and I've noticed actually in your podcast there's a lot of people actually doing that. I've seen a lot of people actually moving from B2C to B2B, not so many the other way around, which I think is really interesting. And I'll tell you why. It's like the things that are going into, what I'm thinking right now, really, what's happened in the marketing world. I think if you look at if you look at the transition from, in particular, from B2C to B2B, which is like my transition, there's two sides really that I think needs focus, and that's what I was analyzing when I look retrospectively in my career. So the first one is really the consumer side. So when you sell a product, when you market a product, regardless if it's a B2B or B2C, you're still selling it, you're still marketing it to a person. I remember like a brilliant tag that Facebook had back in my media agency day, that B2B is not business to business, it's business to Bob. You're talking to a Bob. So essentially, when you create your campaign, when you market your product, you're thinking about like the creativity you need to put into what are the emotions that you need to resonate with that person. And that really hasn't changed really from being in B2C moving into B2B. And in fact, it's probably helped me think about emotion and creativity first when I think about how can I actually convert this business into buying into YunoJuno. I'm a big advocate for what you would say the human to human movement. It's not B2C, it's not B2B, it's human to human. We always talk to human. So on the consumer side, I don't think there is any difference. I think it's just about learning how to speak to your consumer, to the person that's going to buy your product. Now, from the company side, so like the way that you work internally, I think that's when there is a difference moving from B2C to B2B, because obviously when you enter like a B2B role, you need to be working very closely with sales, because you're sharing an objective together, which is ultimately revenue, and you have to make sure that your efforts, your initiatives work together to reach that goal. Now, on this, and this is something that sure it's different from B2C, because most of the B2C companies, and in my case as well, there wasn't a sales team working with the marketing team and with the growth team. But there was always other teams where I was sharing our objectives and our key results. Therefore, really, again, even when it comes to like the internal side of B2C, B2B, regardless of what type of what team you're going to work in with, you're always going to be sharing objectives and key metrics. You're always going to be sharing you're always going to be sharing initiatives with other departments. So yes, the department is different because you need to really strengthen your relationship with sales. But if you're working, in particular in SaaS, if you're working in B2C, you have to be very close with product as much as in B2B as well. But you have to be close to finance as well, because obviously they want to know where that budget is being spent and what you're returning with that budget. So again, it's like, in a nutshell, I don't think there is any different. And I think we're moving more towards a human-to-human centric marketing. And I can see a lot of B2B businesses as well hiring more B2C marketeers because they have that creativity, they understand the emotional connection that you need to have when you market a product.
Yeah. You mentioned communicating with sales, and I'm interested, especially because you had a lot of time you had to start marketing from scratch. So what are your favorite ways to communicate effectively with sales, especially when you have, for example, a product that's very high touch, maybe like a demo-led product with sales? How are you able to convey whatever you're working on with marketing so that they can communicate it to their prospects?
Absolutely. I think that again there is two main sides where you want to focus on when you work with a sales team, in particular, as you said, when you've got like a multiple touch points with your sales pipeline or marketing pipeline. The first one is a constant communication, so making sure that you have set daily, sometimes weekly catch up with the sales team to go through the pipeline and understand what's happening with certain deals, what's happening with certain buying committees. So first, I would say a constant communication is very key. The second one is probably documentation, so making sure that both sides, so both marketing and sales, have a documentation in place where there is slides, one pages, but also the recording of sales calls that can be shared with marketing. So making sure that both of them are feeding into each other with the material that both sides need to have in order to market or sell the product. Yeah, I think it's about communications, but also documentation and sharing of information in between the two teams, which is very key for any B2B business.
Yeah, and I'm curious, you mentioned these recordings, like the famous gongs. Because a lot of times they end up dying in some random obscure corner of the company. So I'm curious, do you actually like regularly look at these sales demos videos, and how do you use them?
Really interesting question, and actually we just started using Gong. I don't know if I'm allowed to I'm not promoting it, but we just started using
not
Gong.
affiliate.
I think about no, I'm not an affiliate, no. I think about 5 months ago, and before I was actually I was pestering my sales team to record every call on Google, which was an absolute nightmare. And then now that we have gone to answer your question, the answer is I watch them weekly, and I have a slot in my calendar where it's called Watch Sales Calls, where I go through all the sales calls that are relevant for what we're doing. And I also ask my team as well to make sure that they watch them. But I understand how it can be very much of one of the many tech that you have, in particular with B2B companies just buying softwares and not actually using it. But again, I think it really comes down to how much of the sales team and the marketing team are really invested in sharing information, and that type of, I think, is also what type of leadership you have in both the sales and marketing department to make sure that things like Gong are really used for meaningful purposes.
Yeah. How do you actually use them? What do you focus on? Is it objections, maybe needs, motivations? What are the buckets that you focus on?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a really great. We use it for everything, really. So any type of exercise we're doing, for example, if you're refreshing your personas and you're looking at the buying committee, you probably want to see what are the pain points of your initiator, what was blocking the decision making that call. So it really depends what are you focusing on at the moment. Because our North Star metrics is essentially inbound calls, we pretty much focus on all the discovery calls and understand what were the pain points, what would make them tick when it comes to talking about our differentiators. So essentially anything that can help us define our messaging and our content strategy when it comes to all the channels that we use to go out and generate demand.
Yeah. All right, so let's keep nerding on B2B, especially because of the complexity we mentioned, right? So you have a lot of different decision-making types, different product lines, solutions, use cases, and all that jazz. So how do you make sure that you adapt your messaging to all of those different facets?
How do I do that? It really comes when it comes to creating your messaging and actually adapting to channels, personas, different buying committees. It really all comes down to what is your positioning strategy. So I think like having a very thorough what I call like a positioning map really will help you then create your value proposition and the messaging for personas, channels, and initiatives as well. And when I talk a positioning strategy, not only just a company positioning, but actually your product positioning as well. So if you're working, for example, if you work with a product like ours at YunoJuno, which has different product lines, each product solution has its own product positioning map. And this map obviously will include the target audience, the pain points, the alternatives for that product line, for that product, sorry, how is it different from other product, but also most importantly as well is what is the positioning archetype that you're going to use for that specific product against your market competitors. Are you looking at, is that product that you're selling a pain points based product, therefore your messaging will be adapted to make sure that it's all you covering the pain points that user is having right now, to make sure that they will understand what you're selling. If it's not pain points, perhaps one of your product line is more of a like an audience-based product. Therefore, your positioning, your messaging will be very much specific on that specific audience, perhaps an HR department or a talent department, where you really nail that knowledge of that audience, and also make sure that your messaging, you constantly talk about that audience features. Again, as a lot of products these days, perhaps they have more of a differentiator type of archetype, but again, they're probably going to focus more on like being the replacer, the better version, the stronger CRM and all that. So I think it's like understanding really, I think to have a really thorough messaging structure, it fits channels and personas. The first thing you want to make sure you have is like a really strong product positioning that might differ from all the other products. Most of the times will be if you work for a company that has multiple product lines.
Yeah, super interesting, and especially because one thing that I've been hearing and like looking from on other companies, even clients, a lot of times their positioning exercises are pretty much just internal exercises that they do, like brainstorming ones. I'm always curious and I always try to figure that out when I work with clients. Do you see positioning as mostly like an internal thing, or do you actually also try to get some feedback outside, like more customers? How do you do that?
Yeah, again, I'm a big advocate of creating a positioning advisory board from the very start. In this positioning advisory board, you want to make sure you have your internal stakeholders within the positioning, but also validate your hypotheses around your positioning with external clients. So I think the first thing you probably will want to do when you're looking at your positioning, if you already have some sort of like a loyal customers, is speak to your loyal customers. Can be 1, can be 5, can be 10, how many you can talk to, but essentially is make sure that your positioning actually makes sense for your audience. I think there's probably a different school of thought on that, because essentially you could argue that your customers aren't really positioning strategists, right? Yeah, your customers just want to buy, they just want to use your platform for the purposes to solve their pain points. However, I think there is still a need to, if your customers won't inform your positioning from the get-going, which is probably set internally, you definitely want to validate it at some point by speaking to customers and actually showing what your value proposition is, and if that makes sense for the customer themselves.
Yeah, and also I think because a lot of times you might think your competition is X amount of other companies, but sometimes speaking with customers, you understand that the competition that they perceive is either different or they do the same thing in a completely different way.
It's funny you say that, because it is a very common thread of going. A lot of marketers always really hyper focus on that competitor, those two competitors, and trying to find that competitive difference. But sometimes in SaaS, you're probably competing with spreadsheets. You're competing with email. You're competing with something that it's not. Sure, you have your direct competitor, but as you said, like sometimes prospects don't even know about that competitor that you really think they are known by everyone. So it's very important that when you create your positioning map, and when you go down into your messaging, you make sure that you're telling your audience that you are the alternative to what they're currently using, which very likely is not going to be. Sometimes, sure, it's one of your competitors in the case of the differentiator-based archetype that I was telling you about earlier. But perhaps, like most of the other times, you're probably going to be. It's about pain points, and it's about what you're solving the problem of a prospect by giving them something that they currently don't have, and your solution is probably replacing spreadsheets, emails, and multiple systems, for example.
Yeah. All right. So apparently you wanted to make it even more difficult. It wasn't enough to have like different B2B personas or channels. You also wanted to have a marketplace, so like a dual-sided, like different audiences completely. So how do you make sure that you keep your messaging focused, relevant, without diluting it?
Yeah. When we're talking about YunoJuno, we actually work with so many different personas and different audiences. As I said, we've got the freelancers, but it's going back to B2B, the B2B formula. Within that business, there is your talent manager, your chief people officers, your head of marketing trying to find a freelancer, and your procurement department. There's so many different audiences that we speak within that business. Then it always goes back to, regardless of how many audiences you have, as a company, our company positioning, our mission, our vision remains the same, regardless of what audiences we're speaking to. And again, and from that, our brand and messaging guideline is just one. So I think it's around like, how do you adapt that brand guideline, and how do you adapt your tone of voice to the different audiences? And that's pretty much, again, based on the person that will be looking after that specific channel, or the person who's going to look after that specific audiences. So in our case, because we, as you said, like we all have different, we're talking to different audiences, each audience will have because each product line has their own positioning map with their own messaging. The same thing will be applied to the audience. So each audience that we're speaking to, so whether it's like a freelancers or the many bobs into B2B, we have very specific frameworks that we use and tone of voice that we use to connect with them.
Yeah, super interesting. Yeah. Next thing, I was wondering, especially with COVID and all the changes, what were like the biggest challenges for you in like positioning, especially against like traditional staffing solutions?
So YunoJuno is a platform that essentially provides everything a business needs to work with freelancers globally. So that includes the talent sourcing with the marketplace, but also global compliance, payments, and insights. We started as a marketplace for creative agencies and tech, but then in the recent years, we evolved into a sort of like an enterprise grade, what we call like a total contracted workforce solution. How do we differentiate ourselves from standard recruitment solution? Essentially, we provide a technology that allows companies to first hire faster, so allow them to onboard freelancers in hours rather than weeks, to save on costs. And costs aren't necessarily just recruiting costs, which obviously is a huge saving for companies, but also from an admin perspective. And so we provide the technology that really help companies to connect with freelancers and onboard them and do compliance checks and payments all in one platform through automation. And then last is around its global compliance headaches. It's very challenging for companies to be compliant when they hire freelancers. And with a solution YunoJuno, you can do that all in one platform that ultimately, whereas normal staffing solutions wouldn't be able to provide, in particular for the type with the pricing that we offer.
So when it comes to enterprise companies, a lot of them go with generic jargon that's not resonating, maybe not even relevant to their specific target audience, which even if you have a huge company, doesn't mean that you cannot speak specifically to your persona, right? So I'm wondering, why do you think that is, that some enterprises are stuck in this jargon situation, and do you have a solution for that?
I'll start from the solution. The solution is I don't really know who came up with that tagline, but it's the KISS, the KISS framework. So like, keep it simple. What's the last phrase? Yeah, I think it's stupid, but I think then it was replaced with something that is a little
nicer.
bit more friendly. I can't remember what it is, but essentially, the answer and the solution to that is keep it simple.
Yeah.
It's not, I think the world of lead generation, complex words to describe a product solution that essentially is a platform that does X to solve Y. It's coming to an end. You can see how the new generation of, I would call them like more forward thinking SaaS. So if you think of your Slack and your HubSpot, but also see how Salesforce has evolved from that sort of messaging to the more simpler way of explaining products. I think I think the reason of that over complicating jargon is probably to try and make there's that thought that a lot of marketers within that like old school SaaS business have, is that the more complex you talk about product and the more your audience will be keen to know more about and actually to find out more if that's the solution for them. Yeah. The reality is that's not the case. If you look at how the messaging have evolved within the B2B world, is pretty much borrowing from the B2C simplicity, right? If I'm selling a t-shirt, I'm going to tell that I'm selling a t-shirt, and you can see why that like simplicity, that keep it simple that we need to find out what that is. Yeah. It's very important to any type of messaging that you're using, because no one wants to spend their time these days to understand what you're actually selling. I think when you're competing with so many SaaS, you really want your prospect to understand as soon as they see your message, whether it's a collateral, an email, a website, your event booth, they need to understand right away what you're selling. If you're not doing that within that 3 seconds, you're gonna lose it against your competitors. It's about simplicity, and it's also about landing that message as soon as possible, because people don't have time to learn new jargons.
All right, awesome. Let's transition into hiring, because I noticed that you talk a lot about skill-based hiring, and you've been marketing leader for a lot of teams, especially starting from scratch. So I was wondering, what do you look for when hiring for your marketing team?
Great question. So I think when you hire for a team, you want to make sure that, you look for skills rather than job titles. The standard marketing team in any SaaS today is it consists of 3 main core skill set, which is your brand marketing, your product marketing, and your growth marketing. And within that, there is various channel expertise and tactical expertise that you want to make sure you have within your team. So that's like the sort of like a hard skills side of it. So I create a skills matrix for each role and when I interview people, I look at my skills matrix and make sure that they fit all the hard skills that I currently need to grow our business. On the soft skills side, which is probably the more complex one, and arguably very important, in particular in startups, you need to make sure from the very beginning that person will be a good fit for your team, a good fit for the rest of the business. Because again, when you work in a small business, you work cross-functionally, you work constantly cross-functionally. And third as well, like you need to make sure the person is ready to work for a fast-moving company. I think it's a lot of people moving from enterprise to startup and startup to enterprise. You just want to make sure that person will fit that speed and that velocity. So having like a right balance between hard skills and soft skills is very crucial when you lead a team.
Super important, especially when it comes to, you mentioned soft skills, and I know that you are mentoring in Growth Mentor, which is a platform for marketing growth mentoring, where basically founders can find specific advice and help from experts. I'm wondering, what do you think makes a great mentor? And you can think personally, but also when it comes to your marketing teams. And what do you think makes a good mentee?
Great question. So I joined actually Growth Mentor now about 6 months ago. And the reason why I joined is because I had in my life incredible mentors that really made the difference in my career. So I felt like it was the right time to give back, really. And yeah, what makes a good mentor? I think it's like the first thing I would probably say, connect emotionally with the mentee. I think it understand having a connection from the beginning to make sure that from a personal perspective you're riding the same wave. Second is if we're talking of, for example, in our case is mentoring founders, making sure that truly I would be mentoring someone whose idea I really believe in. And so again, I will make sure from the get going that it's a product that I really believe in, and I really want to help that founder or that go to market to make the most of my expertise. And lastly, being prepared for what they need, making sure that my expertise can actually, when we talk about expertise, my professional expertise can actually help them grow, and being very honest with them. I had few, and you probably have as well. You had few requests where they had very little. I had very little experience, and I think it's very important that you from the very beginning you're very honest about what you can actually deliver, what you can't deliver.
Such a good point. It all goes back to the transparency as well, right?
Indeed.
All right, my last question is, especially now with all the whirlwind of AI and all these fast changes, what do you see some trends in B2B SaaS marketing being, and how should other leaders get ready for them?
There is so much talk about generative AI these days, and I think if you're a marketer and every day you feel you should know the latest update, I feel you. Look, I think it's really, in my opinion, I think it's very early. We're at the very early stage. I think I see AI, generative AI will have a huge impact on marketing and on any business, really. We're at the very early stage. What we're seeing right now is probably very little of what's about to come next. I think if I think of like the question that everyone's asking, will I replace growth or will I replace marketing? I don't think that AI will replace marketing or will replace growth. I think what AI will definitely do, and is doing right now, is enhancing people to spend more time being creative and actually hand over the more repetitive and simpler tasks to AI. So I'd say like my advice to any marketer at any level is to embrace the change and embrace AI, and make sure you're making the most of it right now, because it's definitely going to have an impact on the way we are working right now and will be working. And if I think companies that won't embrace that change will struggle, because they'll have to compete with other companies. They're probably going a million times faster purely because they started using AI smartly for things that they say, for your daily mundane tasks that they no one want to do, and you don't need people to do anymore because technology can do it for you.
Embracing your enemy in a way.
Indeed. Yeah.
All right, Mickey, thank you so much for jumping on the podcast. It's been a pleasure to dig deeper into these topics and have a longer chat. So where can people find you? So they can find your LinkedIn, they can find YunoJuno's website. Where else?
Thank you, Chris. LinkedIn, I would say, is probably the main platform for both myself and YunoJuno. So search for Michele Tropeano, connect, and feel free to DM me anytime. And if you want to stay up to date with everything we do, YunoJuno, follow us on LinkedIn.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Chat soon. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Chris. See you later.
Thank you so much for listening to the pod. I hope you enjoyed the episode. If you did, the best thing you could do to support the show and help me as a small business owner would be to leave a review. Head over to Apple Podcasts or Spotify and let me know what you think. If you don't want to miss future episodes, subscribe, and if you have any feedback, questions, or suggestions for future episodes, just hit me up on LinkedIn at Christopher Silvestri or Twitter at SilvestriChris. Speak to you next time.